What's up, everybody? It's the HOMIE Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And it's just a quick video. I wanted to kind of pick up on the topic of yesterday's interview with the boxer that's up on the channel. And then also I tapped into a live earlier. I don't know if the person wants me to say it, so I'll wait and put it in the comments if so. We were talking about street gangs versus prison gangs and what that looks like in prison, right? So I think part of the issue, if you want to say that, within the Latino community, specifically in California, is we grow up street gang members, right? Northerners and Southerners. Bulldogs as well, although their dynamics look different when they go to prison, so I'm not really going to speak on that. But so we grow up as street gang members, right? We're from the neighborhood. We dress how the homies from the neighborhood dress. We bang on people that don't get along with our neighborhood. There's supposed to be an effort at less red on red violence up north, but it's always existed. The violence down south, it's oftentimes Southsiders fighting other Southsiders, but because that umbrella isn't what matters, right? What matters is the neighborhood. And so that street gangbang lifestyle is different because everybody's from your hood, right? There's a personal relationship with folks. There's a kinship there that exists. You guys are really involved with each other's lives. And so that looks one way, right? And I think a lot of like Bloods and Crips and other groups that might be considered gangs from other, races, I think there's a similarity in how they operate in the streets in that regard. We're just from the hood doing hood stuff. So what happens when you go to prison, right? Well, if you're a Blood or a Crip from a neighborhood in an area, you go to prison, you're still a street gang member, right? You're still from your hood. You rock with your homeboys. That might open up a little bit. And it's not my place to speak on black politics behind the wall. I've never been a black person, much less a black person incarcerated. But from my familiarity with it, and feel free to tap in on the comments or something to correct me if I'm wrong. You might be a Blood from LA from a certain neighborhood, and maybe now you go to prison and you rock more widely with Bloods in general from LA. Or you're a Crip from Sacramento and you're from a certain neighborhood. Now you go to prison and you rock more generally with Crips from Sacramento, and maybe even more generally just Crips from Northern California. And then sometimes the Crips or the Bloods overall. Obviously, you rock for your race. So if there's a race riot between whites and blacks, for example, then no matter what your politics are, what your neighborhood is, or what your affiliation is, if any, if you're a black dude, you're liable to be involved in a race riot. And I'm using blacks more than whites here because that's what I'm more familiar with, both as a northerner and thus doing time with Africanos, but also just from being from the Bay Area in Northern California in the streets. I grew up around black and brown and poly people. And so your street gang stuff carries over there. And of course you got an option to sign up. There are prison gangs, quote unquote, that center around black folks and center around white folks. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about street gang members. And so the idea of who you answer to and that sort of thing is a little bit different, right? What the expectations are is a little bit different. I'm not going to say that they're low expectations whatsoever, just that they're different. You answer to folks from your neighborhood. Maybe you answer to somebody else that's not from your neighborhood, but there's still a connection there. You're a northerner in the streets banging. You're a southerner in the streets banging. We come up with all the same street gang characteristics, right? And attitudes and norms. But then we go to prison and we are immediately placed up under a prison gang, right? If we're being honest. So we immediately, it's not a conscious decision that you make. Nobody asks your permission. If you go to prison, you're labeled as a northerner, man, you function up under the NF, period. If you go to prison and you're a Southsider, you're function up under the MA, period. You may not know them. You may never see one. You may never communicate with one. But that is your authority. And And there's levels and there's layers to this stuff. And that's not something I'm really going to get into in this video because, like I said, I want to keep it brief. But in terms of the expectations on you, they change, right? Because somebody from your neighborhood, if you're a year to the house and they're doing a life sentence, the odds that somebody from your neighborhood is going to be like, hey, bro, I need you to sacrifice your date and go handle this business is slim. I'm not going to say it never happens, but it's slim because, man, that's your homie. You know, that's a dude from your neighborhood. You want him to get back out to the streets and be out in the neighborhood and you know, be a presence out there. Maybe not for gangbanging, but just checking on families and going across the street to, you know, see your mom and make sure she's good type stuff. With the North and the South, of course, you have people from your same neighborhood sometimes behind the wall, but there's also a big disconnect. And you could be taking orders from somebody that you've never even met before. A kite comes from the hole. Hey, this is what needs to happen, right? And you can have somebody that has a boatload of time who turns around and tells you, hey, bro, it's your turn for whatever reason, right? And you don't have that option to say no. You know, and that was part of the conversation yesterday with Box in terms of where are the obligations and where aren't they. And what came out of that is really the obligations of somebody going behind the wall as a Northerner is you are going to do whatever the hell you're told or your career is going to be over. And I can't speak to the specific details in terms of Southerners, but I believe that it's similar, if not identical, right? Now, part of that gets complicated because there's this idea of if you've been in the streets and you join this lifestyle, you know what you're signing up for. That is true for street gang membership. That is true. You got homeboys from your neighborhood that come back and tell you this is how it works in prison, this and that. And when you go to the neighborhood, when you go to prison, you're going to be accountable to people from your neighborhood to conduct yourself a certain way. But with Raza, it's not like that, right? It's not so much like that. A lot of folks are not well schooled on what to expect when they go to prison. A lot of folks are kind of schooled wrong. And sometimes we're schooled right, but then you hit in an environment where the authority figures don't subscribe to that. And you've got no choice. So even for myself coming up in the system, you know, as a Northerner, Norteño, Hermano, whatever, I was taught that people had options. I was taught that we were obligated behind the wall, that we took charge, we led by example, we made the sacrifices, right? If somebody else rose their hand or if somebody else was striving to reach those levels, then of course they could be called upon to make the sacrifices that somebody of the caliber that they're trying to be would have to make, right? So if I want to become a big homie, I could be asked to do some big homie type shit on that journey. And the expectation is that I'm going to do it because that's what's involved with being a big homie. And that's what I'm aspiring to. But there's a lot of folks that go to prison from the North, and I assume from the South as well, who don't want to be big homies, right? Doesn't mean they're punks or they're cowards or they're lewas or whatever. They just don't want to be big homies. They're trying to do their time, right? And do their time with character and integrity. And hey, if we're going to be on some gangbang shit, then okay, fine, because I'm a gangster. But I'm not trying to get into the rest of stuff. I don't want to have to go stab this dude who's another Northerner on the other side of the yard who I've never even talked to before because you told me to, right? I don't have that level of commitment to the politics. And there's the difference. Street gang members follow street gang politics, even in prison, right? And they may shift a little bit, but it's still, you know, pretty much street gang-like. Street gang members from the North and the South, street gang sits out the window as soon as you walk through the door, as soon as you go to classification, as soon as you get that bed card that says you're a Northern Mexican or a Southern Mexican, that street shit's gone. And whether you like it or not, right? And so there's a difference there, absolutely. And people think that you have a distinction. And to get back to what I was saying, the way I was schooled is that some folks did have an option, others did not. Those who did not were people that chose to put themselves in a position to not have an option. The ethical thing, the responsible thing, if we're staying true to our teachings, and I'm speaking for folks from the North in particular, if we're sticking true to our teaching, we're here to upbuild, we're here to secure, we're here to provide, we're here to see homies advance, we're here to make sure that everybody has equal access to the, privileges and incentives available in the general population, and set an example of being an honorable person, right? Being a person of integrity, being a person of discipline, getting educated, getting a trade so that you could hit the streets, you can have a job. These are the things that I was told, and I know I'm not the only one, of what we stood for, right? Man, we want you to go out there and be successful. Now, if you want to stay with this criminal stuff and take next steps, then absolutely, we got a spot for you within the enterprise on the streets. But really, we want you to leave prison a better person than you came in, right? And in order to have an environment in which that is possible, yes, some sacrifices are going to have to be made. And people are going to be called upon to do that, right? We do have to protect ourselves collectively. And sometimes we have to fight to get access to the things that we want, right? And there are oppressive forces that sometimes we need to secure ourselves against. But that responsibility lies primarily on those who have made a commitment to carry the banner to some degree, right? And from the conversation yesterday, and I've kind of been sitting back thinking about it since, I think Box is right in the sense of a lot of us are schooled that way. I was schooled that way at the hermano stage of things, at the norteño stage of things. And when I was doing time, there was no C's on the yard. There was no emeros on the yard. And so I think that makes a difference, right? With the end of hostilities and the emptying of the shoe, you have people that have a very different perspective on what it is to be from Northern California and be raza, right? And be behind the wall, that now are out shuffling amongst the manpower, so to speak, right? Amongst the household. And of course, they're not gonna shrink from their standards and their beliefs, right? And they are lifelong committed people who have made incredible sacrifices. And so I'm not dogging them or putting them down. Most of them I don't know personally. And this is not to talk shit about any organization or any group. It's also not to advocate for participation in any organization or group. As I said yesterday, man, I'm a civilian. So somebody comes and taps my shoulder to put in some work for the cause or the collective or whatnot, you're going to get a dial tone. And that's not because I'm a coward or I ain't with the business or nothing, but I did my time and I did it the right way and I left. And I enjoy being a civilian, enjoy being a father, enjoy being an old man to my old lady, enjoy turning 45 today. And so I'm not sacrificing that unless it's for something I think is worth it. And there's very little that I think is worth it. And so, and I don't apologize for that view, right? And whatever that makes whoever wants to call me whatever, that's your business. See, in a street gang sense, though, that's all very understandable and acceptable, right? If I was just a street gang member, I'd come home, because nobody wants a 45-year-old dude posted on the corner being a gang member anyways. That's just a bad look, to be quite honest. And I know they exist, and they exist from up north and down south, and I would say it's a bad look no matter who you are and where you're from. Grow up, man, is my opinion. But that schooling exists, but the practice, you have people that will operate outside of what we're taught. That's why oftentimes the word is used, propaganda, right? Now, it was not propaganda when I was schooling people in there. I was teaching them what I understood and what I believed. And I lived to uphold those beliefs. And I lived to model those beliefs. Not that I was some high-powered guy or I was some special guy. I was just another bro. But I took it serious and I took the cause serious. And I had no way to know up until I knew that things look different higher up the food chain, that there are people who have a different view, that there are people whose interests are different than the interests that I was schooled in. And those people have more authority than me. Those people have more power than me. Those people hold my career in their hands. But you don't know that right away, right? And it's not always because somebody's trying to manipulate you. It's because the belief system is different at different levels. And we can pretend like it's not. And that doesn't mean that there's not some people at the highest level who still hold the value and pride and positive leadership of those middle management folks, if you will, right? I'm dropping an interview hopefully later on today if YouTube clears it, with somebody who I think is an example of that, right? With a carnal who is basically like a hermano with C status in terms of his worldview, right? But there's not many of those. They exist, but there's not a ton of them. And so you run up on a yard and come across somebody who is of that status, but is not of that mindset, they can tell you whatever the hell they want. And you will do it or your career will be over. Period. There's no grace in that. Right? It's you're here to the house and I want you to kill your celly. What are you gonna do? Right? Nah, bro, I didn't sign up for that. But you did. You didn't think that you did. When you was 11 years old banging, when you was 12 years old getting jumped in the hood, when you was 15 running around there, clapping at people, right? You didn't think that's what you signed up for. When you first came through prison and told you about the cause and camaraderie and canalismo and how we all want to see one another better ourselves and we stand up against oppression and we value each other and we build each other up. You didn't believe that, right? You didn't think that's what you signed up for. Then you commit to do it behind the wall and you're like, hey, behind the wall, while I'm here, I'll do anything, but I have a right to not have to behave that way in the streets if I choose not to. That's what we believe. That's what we're taught. But that's not the reality. Because if somebody comes along that is in a position of authority and they place expectations on you, then it doesn't matter what you signed up for. Because in their mind, what matters is how they view you, not how you view them. If they view you as a pawn in their chess game, they get to move you how they choose. And that's just the reality, right? I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm saying it's the reality. If that's not a reality that you're interested in being your reality, mind your decisions, right? I think it would be well served for folks to be better informed of what they sign up for when they pick up that red paño as a kid, when they put on that LA Dodgers jersey as a kid, right? It would be prudent. It would be good for our community if they were told that. But it would not be good for those at the utmost leadership. Because realistically, not a lot of people are going to sign up for that, if we're being honest. The reason a lot of folks in prison sign up for stuff like that is because they already have no date. They're not coming home. So if I'm never coming home and I have no chance of coming home, then yes, this is my world and this is my environment and I'm going to adapt to that. And my values are going to be based on the fact that I'm never going to see freedom again. So then, of course, I'm going to operate from a different view, right? But you open up the doors all of a sudden and give me a chance, my values might shift, right? I was down for whatever in prison. And I wanted to try to come home and not go back to prison, and I did. And thanks to community, I've been pretty successful at it so far. That attitude of I would do anything for the cause, that was true every single moment that I was incarcerated. That is not true now. And it's not because I disregard that or there was not great teachings or I did not learn a lot of things or there was not value in my participation. There was. But I'm a different person now. And I'm in a different place. And my worldview is impacted by where I exist. And I do not exist in prison. I exist here. And so now there's some values that I learned in there and stuff that I still hold to, of course. There's bonds that I live by, to be quite honest, out here. But because it's good moral character, not because I'm following the law of a movement or an organization, it's good advice, right? Don't disrespect your homeboy's old lady or his family. That's just good advice. That's just good moral character. I read it in the bonds, but it's also kind of for common sense to be a decent person. And so, yeah, anyways, the spill's a little bit all over the place, but I wanted to piggyback on that, man, especially with the conversation that I had earlier. all you street gang fools, right? And I know youngsters don't watch this. Some of you guys might share this with youngsters in your life, but I look at the algorithms, man, and ain't none of these quote unquote prison channels reaching anybody under the age of 18, right? Like a fraction of 1% are under 18. At least that's how YouTube's identified them. So this notion that we out here talking to youngsters on these platforms is not true. We're not. But we're talking to people who know youngsters, right? We're talking to people that have youngsters in their circles. And we're talking to people, quite frankly, that might be older and still had a mindset of a youngster. And so that's kind of who I'm gearing this towards. Don't get all high and mighty with, hey, man, this is the extent to which I'm willing to engage. You lose that right when you sign up. And you sign up when you start banging in the streets. Be safe, man. Be a homie. Help others move in excellence and help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Take care.